You are listening to the Feed Podcast. To get your weekly fix, subscribe to us on iTunes or visit our website, thefeedpodcast.com.
One of the things we are seeing a lot more of with the rise of handcrafted cocktail bars is the ice game has really been upgraded, right?
Oh my gosh, it's incredible. And I have gotten to be such a geek about it that people don't even want to talk to me about cocktails because the first thing I'll say is like, oh, but what's the ice? Which ice are you using and all that? But you know, it does make a difference because if you think about the lightweight ice, and I have to call it lightweight ice, that you get in most restaurants, the stuff dilutes or dissolves or melts super fast.
Yeah.
So it will dilute your cocktail. Whereas if you have a piece of really hard and typically clear ice, it will chill the drink and dilute it in just the right way. I'm into ice.
And when they fit the glass perfectly, there's just something so aesthetic about it.
That is beautiful. That is
Yeah.
really beautiful. I don't care so much about that as I do about how hard the ice is and and the dilution rate, basically.
Well, coming up on today's show, a behind-the-scenes look at how and where bartenders are getting their ice and what these frigid water experts are doing to attract business. Stay with us. The Iceman surely cometh. This is the Feed Podcast. I'm Steve Dolinsky, a food and travel reporter at ABC 7 News, the Chicago Tribune, and Canada's Globe and Mail.
And I'm Rick Bayless, the chef and owner of Chicago's Frontera Grill, Topolobampo, Xoco, Leña Brava, and the host of public television's Mexico, One Plate at a Time.
And every week, the Feed takes a deep dive into the world of professional chefs, restaurateurs, food artisans, and drink experts, sharing their stories and uncovering their passion for food and drink. But that's not all. Rick and I are always traveling the globe for our jobs, eating, drinking, and immersing ourselves in the local culture. And if we find something exciting along the way, you can be sure it's going to find its way here to our James Beard Award-winning podcast. Well, next time you're in a bar and the drink you order comes with a perfectly cut cube with 90-degree angles, or maybe a tall rectangular block that just fits into the Collins glass you're sipping from, there's a good chance the bar outsourced the job to someone else. Unless you're the aviary, where you have the budget and means to create your own ice program, bars are turning to ice experts to get the job done. And I'm wondering, you have several restaurants and you've got several bars, and there's a pretty serious mezcal program at one of them. And what are you doing about ice?
We are not outsourcing our ice. We just have two kinds of ice in all of our restaurants. One is a very hard, clear cube, and then the other is the ice that you would find in ice water. So we haven't gotten into that element where you get the rectangular pieces that fit in the Collins glass and all that, sort of the spheres and all. We haven't gotten into it at that level because right now I'm interested more in a program that is sort of economically viable for our restaurants, which are not like super expensive places. And I think when you get into that kind of ice where you've got either your bartenders whittling it down themselves or you're outsourcing it, the cost of that, it just makes the drink prices go sky high. And I'm really interested in keeping them more moderate, but at the same time offering a really top-notch experience.
Because if, like the company we're going to talk to today, they're charging 50 cents an ice cube.
Correct, right.
You've got to add another $1 and a quarter to your drink, right?
Yeah, for sure. Maybe more than $1 and a quarter. Yeah. And so then the prices do go considerably higher. And it is aesthetic, and people should do it if that's what they're really interested in. And I love it. And I will go to places and I will support them. That's just not personally where I choose to spend the money.
Well, I was having a drink at Prairie School, the new place set up by Jim Meehan of PDT in New York, and it's in Chicago's West Loop. Super cool cocktail bar. I asked the bartender where they got their perfect ice cubes from. He said a place called Just Ice. So I looked them up, gave them a call, and found myself driving down to the city's south side a few weeks ago. I'm standing on the chilly, damp basement of The Plant, an enormous mixed-use building on Chicago's south side. Every business inside of it is food-related. In the early 20th century, they produced ham here. We're not that far from the original Union Stockyards processing facility. And the neighborhood is actually called Back of the Yards. I'm here to meet Rosanna Lloyd, the president of Just Ice, a 4-year-old company with just 6 employees.
So we make one product, and we do it really well. We make perfectly clear, large format cocktail ice. So if you go downtown, you have a nice whiskey or a old-fashioned or a Manhattan, you're going to see a really big, perfectly clear cube in that drink. That's us. We do that for the city of Chicago, surrounding suburbs, and Milwaukee.
So how did you get into this business? Because it seems like a very specialized niche to make one thing and to just freeze water basically for a living.
We got into it. So I opened this company with my husband, Mike, in 2013. We got into it because we wanted to start a business together. I was traveling. I was on the road a lot at the time. I was a race mechanic for SRAM, which is a bicycle parts company.
Lloyd and her husband wanted to start their own business, and after they met two guys in New York City who were supplying the ice for their own place, Dutch Kills Bar, they talked them into allowing Lloyd to stay with them in New York and train with them. The plan was to open a Chicago branch of their company, but it fell through.
So we kind of, had a crisis of faith and all that, and then we said, you know what, we're going to do it anyway. So we went ahead and did it. With a little help from my parents and our own funds. Opened it on a ridiculously small amount of money, like just offensive. I would never do it again.
I want to ask you about your big investment over here. Let's walk over to these machines. What are these called?
So these are called Klein Bells, or ice block makers. They're called Klein Bells because of the guy who's the biggest producer of them, but there's several different producers. So
About 12 it looks like or so back here. They're pretty big. They're just giant squares, but inside these squares you open up the lid and you see 6 different compartments.
Yes. Well, it's actually 2 different compartments with 2 dividing plates in each compartment.
Oh, I see that. Okay. But to get 6 blocks, but you have 2 compartments.
Yes.
And so what are you doing? You're pouring water in here and you're freezing it. Simple. Easy job.
Yes, it's really simple. Basically, you just fill the bins with water. There's a freezer plate on the bottom of the cabinet, and it forms ice at the bottom. And then once that ice starts to form, we turn on circulating pumps, and that circulates the water, which retards the freezing process. So you're going to get a nice, even, crystalline structure. It's called a unidirectional freeze, so it's the same thing as lake ice. So lake ice can be super clear because it's forming from the top down. So the air is super cold, the water's a little warmer underneath, and it's circulating. So it's freezing just a layer at a time. That's why you get that really clear lake ice that you can see through. Yeah.
You freeze these. How long does it take to freeze these into blocks?
So we harvest at 2 days and 3 days. 2 days, you get about a 200 to 220 pound block. 3 days, you get 300 pound or a little over 300 pound.
You pull them out with looks like a winch and a chain thing?
Yep, that's a overhead hoist.
Overhead hoist. Okay, then you bring them over here, and there's all these blocks lined up now on like a sort of a conveyor. It's not really a conveyor, it's not moving.
No, it's just a slippery table. We could, one of the greatest things about ice and moving ice about is that it's slippery. So a lot of our stuff is we just use gravity to move things.
Now these blocks, these rectangular blocks, are not perfect on all sides. I see the top is a bit bent in, but that's okay, right?
That's okay. We're going to cut that off and cut perfectly square pieces out of it. So
you got 2 people working over here. What are they doing? They have band saws?
So we got 2 people. These are food grade. These are meat band saws. So these are band saws that you would typically see in a butcher.
They're cutting through bones and stuff.
Yeah. So we use these band saws to cut the ice. The first person on the first bandsaw is cutting the ice into slabs, and then they're lining it up on a transfer table, and then the second person will grab those slabs that are cut to a certain thickness and cut them down into sticks, and then they'll take those sticks, turn them around, and cut them into cubes.
Now, do cocktail bars have specs? Like they'll say, I've got a 10-ounce rocks glass, I need to have a cube that's X by X, or I've got a tall, like a Collins glass, I need to have a long piece of ice that goes in there. I mean, are there standard measurements now in your industry for different glasses?
Yes and no. So we have 6 standard sizes that fit almost any glassware, but there's always some weird glassware out there. There's always somebody who, is doing like a sideways 45-degree angle rocks glass, or, a curvy Collins glass or something like that. So we do end up doing custom shapes for some people, but generally our sizes will fit any standard.
As an amateur drink enthusiast myself, I see the perfectly clear cubes about 3 inches square with exacting 90-degree angles, and I want them for my home bar.
We don't sell to the consumer market yet, so we're not in grocery stores and we're not in liquor stores. That's a packaging issue. But we do have an awful lot of people come down here all the way down to back of the yards to pick up ice for their cocktail party or birthday or whatever they have. One guy shows up just because he loves whiskey, and he stocks the ice and just drinks his whiskey on it.
What do you sell an ice cube for?
50 cents a piece.
And the key, again, if I ask a bartender, they're going to tell me they do it because it looks cool or because it dilutes the drink very slowly?
Both. Absolutely both. It looks amazing. If you put it in a cocktail, hands down, you will sell more of that cocktail because it's beautiful. People are blown away by, perfectly clear ice, I guess. It does. It's a very beautiful product. Also, it dilutes the cocktail whale list. It doesn't add any sort of mineral taste to it. It doesn't add, some ice you get lime scale buildup or something in your ice machine. It starts to taste a little funny. So there's none of that. And
like clean and cold, and it doesn't dilute the drink.
Yes, absolutely.
And the funny thing was, as I was telling someone I was working on this show, they said, sort of like the guy in The Graduate who whispers to Dustin Hoffman about plastics, they said to me, Klein Bell. It's all about the Klein Bell machines.
Oh, yes.
Because you've got one of those machines, which I'm guessing costs like $60,000-$70,000.
I think it may.
That's how these guys make them. And of course, at Just Ice, they've got like 6 of these machines all day long making ice, hoisting it out of these things, cutting it with chainsaws and bandsaws. And the fact that they keep it cold. I mean, the poor guy, they're rotating in the freezer when the ice cubes are coming off the machine, and he's literally, he's bundled up and he's putting them into the containers, and they sit in the freezer, and they somehow manage to get all these ice cubes to their clients, not just in Chicago, but Milwaukee as well.
Right. So they have to have freezer trucks.
They got to have freezer
to be
trucks
able to do all of that. No, you really have to manage all of it very well. It's like because I am in the food world, there are a lot of people who work in freezers all day long because that's the job that they have. It may be frozen foods. In this case, it's just frozen water, but they get used to it. And yes, they have to rotate in and out and all that sort of stuff. But I think it is part of that job. But it's so fascinating to me that we've come to this level with the ice programs anywhere, and that there is that much business that somebody could set up a spot to do this. I was in Mexico City fairly recently, and somebody started this amazing ice company down there too, because I found it the same way you found this one, just by going into a bar and ordering a drink and saying, where do you guys get your ice?
And the only reason they set this up in Chicago was because things didn't work out with these guys in New York who have a place called Dutch Kills, and so they're obviously way ahead in doing it in New York. But not that long ago, it was all about those Japanese ice cube makers that had the perfect 1-inch.
Those are the ones that we use in our restaurants too.
Okay, well, those machines are called
Hojizaki's. There's a couple of brands. Yes.
So you use those machines?
We do.
Okay.
We actually do. That's
those are
what
fine.
We do, and they make really hard, perfectly clear ice.
Do you think we're going to look back in 5 or 6 years and say, like, I can't believe we ever didn't have this? We have ice programs everywhere now, and everybody's buying ice, and it's maybe 25 cents an ice cube, and it's like you have to do it for your program, otherwise you're nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're just on the pickup right now, and I think that really soon it will be just expected.
Coming up next, Rick and I head to one of Just Ice's clients here in Chicago to see how they create drinks based on what kinds of ice they can procure. Stay with us.
Arrived at the meal late? Listen to back episodes of The Feed Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Search The Feed Podcast.
Have a beef with something you heard? Looking for a little extra side dish? Let us know on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at The Feed Podcast.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. We are now on location here at Sable. This is inside the Hotel Palomar in River North in Chicago, just a couple of blocks down from where we tape the podcast. And we are with Mike Jones. He's the head bartender here. Mike, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We should say thanks for having us into the bar here. Yeah,
Actually, yes, thank you for having us here.
Okay, so there's a little bit of a connection. We talked earlier in the show about Just Ice. Tell me about how Just Ice is connected to this place.
So one of my predecessors, Mike Ryan, started the company Just Ice. He had a vision years ago for custom and craft ice for craft cocktails. He and his wife started tinkering around, if you will. They started the business. We were their first account, and since then...
Was he still working here at the time?
I think so. Yeah, it was like the end of his tenure here. They started the company. We were his first account, and as a result, they have a booming business now.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. It's nice to start with a secured account.
Right.
So this has been going on in New York for some time. I remember she was telling me when they were first thinking about starting this company, they were going to partner with somebody in New York to have kind of the Chicago branch here. So this has been going on the East Coast for some time, correct?
Correct. Yeah, for sure. I mean, Mike's been gone now for 4 years, I think, and so it was the end of those 4 years. So that was a good 4.5 years ago. We started working with an ice program.
Right.
And what do you guys need from a person dedicated to ice production? Why do you need that?
In the beginning, when we tried to start our ice program, we were getting blocks of ice, 300 to 400 pound blocks of ice delivered whole. So then it was up to us to chainsaw it down and then manually cut it to specific sizes that we would use for application.
So that was a line item in the budget. You needed a chainsaw here at the bar.
Correct.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's not uncommon at hotels to have a chainsaw because a lot of people do ice sculptures and things like that in bigger hotels perhaps than this one, but still it's not uncommon. But then where would you do that production? Because you need a cold room to do it, right?
A cold room would help. Otherwise, you have to work really fast. We did not have a very big cold room to work it in, so we were taking it to our parking garage, and we had a corner set up in our parking garage for ice carving.
I'm not saying a word. I'm not saying a word.
Yeah. We're buying just a solid 2x2x2 cube from Just Ice,
Right.
and then from time to time we'll ask them to do larger cubes for, say, a highball or a Collins glass, and they'll do long cylindrical,
long, skinny ones.
Right.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And there's other times that we've had them for another application. They've what they call impregnated ice, and so they'll freeze a flower inside or
that's all.
another item.
I was getting a little bit worried there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they'll freeze something inside that we've asked for.
I see.
You don't get the big pieces that you then hand chip away behind the bar?
We have not done that in quite a few years. When our ice program started, that was what we were doing, and we were doing it in the sense we just had large ice molds. We would freeze on our own. We wouldn't get the same quality in the crystal clear ice, but we'd have a nice ice cube, and then we would hand chisel it.
Actually, I remember sitting at this bar, probably right here where I'm standing now, and seeing the turning of one of these square ice cubes into a sphere using a brass device. I don't remember what it was, but it would literally melt the outside of it and make these beautiful spheres. So you guys have been on the cutting edge, shall we say, of ice production for a long time.
For a long time, yeah. We have had that. I believe the same machine that you're talking about, Just Ice, uses it now.
Is that right?
For their production of ice.
Yeah.
But yeah, and again, that was great until we got busy, and if you needed multiple, because it was made from copper, it would take on the temperature. So the 30 seconds now became 7-10 minutes to create the same ice.
I can imagine that.
Okay, so you've got two glasses in front of us, each with some different types of ice. Explain these.
So Hoshizaki is the smaller cubes. Hoshizaki,
that refers to the machine.
Sorry?
That's the machine.
Yes, that's the name of the machine and the company that makes it.
When I looked at this, I asked you sort of in a knee-jerk way, is this cold draft? Because cold draft was the machine everybody used to use to make this kind of small, square, clear.
It was a really big solid cube for shaking. We had cold draft at one time. We ran into a lot of problems.
As everyone did. We used to have them as well.
Yeah. And Hoshizaki is just a little bit more dependable as far as the production.
Absolutely, but it does produce a very hard kind of 1 by 1 by 1 cube of ice that works really good in cocktail making. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. So
that's not going to dilute as fast. That will dilute not as rapidly as a really tiny crushed ice,
Small
right?
shaker
And
ice.
a small shaker ice, but even
Or just the regular ice that most people put in water glasses. That's the other kind of ice. And a lot of people don't even know that is not necessarily good for cocktail making because it just dilutes it so fast.
Absolutely.
So I would say, so the larger cube you have here, the one that you bought from Just Ice, why use this versus the Hoshizaki?
Hoshizaki is obviously a smaller cube, but the Hoshizaki will, because it's a smaller cube, will melt quicker. So the idea behind the big giant solid cube from Just Ice, it dilutes at a slower pace, and it doesn't really take away or compromise the quality of the cocktail, or just a single spirit. There's a lot of people that like to drink whiskey on the rocks. They like it cold, but not necessarily diluted.
And this will keep it cold for a really long time without diluting it very much.
It'll dilute it, but certainly not as rapidly as just smaller ice cubes.
So you're typically, is that then the typical thing going into this glass with the large ice cube, just a single spirit?
A single spirit or let's say a Manhattan or an old fashioned, something brown and stirred and boozy. Yeah, definitely. Big and spirit
Negronis
forward.
and things that are real booze forward.
Absolutely. Anything real spirit forward, any cocktail that they ask for on the rocks, they'll get a large cube for.
And what would go into the other one, the Hoshizaki?
Let's say a sour of some sort, any cocktail with citrus, supposed to be, something that doesn't sit around very long, a margarita, something super easy to drink, more of a, not really a sipper as much as it's, I can knock this one back quickly.
Now, do you think bartenders or people who worry about the budgets are ever concerned about, because I think these are like 50 cents a piece for these ice cubes.
I wish.
Oh, they're not? Okay.
They're more than 50 cents. I wish they were only 50 cents, but they affect the cost of cocktails.
But I know, because you're in River North, people expect to pay a little bit more, you're downtown, but do you ever get like second looks, like, you charge how much for a cocktail? I mean, does it ever concern you in terms of having to boost the price because of just the ice cube?
There's always a concern, right? And especially with competition being what it is, I mean, and everybody, I think, has to be price conscious and has to be competitive in their prices. I think we're lucky enough to be established and have a reputation that people sort of walk in the door and already have an expectation or know what to expect as far as pricing on cocktails.
Sable has been on the forefront since it opened of the craft cocktail movement. So I think people do associate this place with really high quality cocktails.
They have green chartreuse on tap here, so that's a kind of a serious thing for any bartender, right?
Yeah,
serious.
Very serious.
Serious would be like an understatement. Yes.
All right. So, and the other one, by the way, is crushed ice, which your barback is working on bringing up here too, right? So we got the solid two by 2 by 2, 1 by 1 by 1, and then the crushed ice. Those are kind of your three palettes.
They are, and crushed ice typically we're using for, if you will, tiki-style cocktails. Crushed ice will tend to dilute rapidly, and depending on application, your cocktail can just completely fall apart. Typically, anytime we're using crushed ice, we're talking about some cocktail with high flavor profile, really intense, really deep flavors, and the idea behind it is you'd like a little dilution in it, because if we are talking tiki, a lot of times we're again talking spirit on top of spirit on top of spirit.
Right.
So dilution is important.
So explain to us a cocktail that you have on your menu that you think is perfect with crushed ice. I'm not a huge crushed ice guy because I don't tend to go toward the tiki drinks, but now you've got me really thinking about how could I create a cocktail that would be perfect for crushed ice. So tell us your best.
We have a couple that are on our large format cocktail menu now. One is called Le Chapeau.
Describe what a large format cocktail
So we're doing punches, if you will. We're building them from anywhere from 2 people to a party of 8 people.
Let's do this. Let's take a break. When we come back, Mike Jones making 2 drinks for us using a couple different types of ice cubes. Stay with us.
Arrive at the meal late? Check out previous episodes, get recipes from ingredient challenges, and see behind-the-scenes pictures at thefeedpodcast.com.
You're listening to The Feed Podcast. To get your weekly fix of the feed, subscribe to our podcast at itunes.com.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. We are here with Mike Jones, the head bartender at Sable in River North in Chicago. And we're talking about fancy ice, custom ice, ice you have to make yourself, which is obviously crushed, I'm guessing. So, Mike, you've got 2 drinks you're going to make for us today. What are they? And obviously, the ice cubes are important.
Yeah, so first one we're going to do is Good Luck and Good Night, kind of a play on an old classic Manhattan or a Brooklyn, if you will. We're going to serve that on the Just Ice Cube that we just talked about.
Okay, so that was the 2x2x2, the perfect square ice cube.
Correct. So a little Tempest Fugit, creme de cacao.
Creme de cacao.
Just a nice, rich chocolate liqueur. Use a little Amaro d'Angostura. Just some warm baking spices, a little bit of richness to the cocktail.
But is that like Angostura bitters, or it's a step away?
So it's a little bit of a step down, not quite as intense. Clearly doesn't have all the bitterness as well, but the same definitely the same profile with those warm baking spices. And then just a little bit of Averna, another Amaro, some more warm baking spices to put on top of that.
So does that? Am I thinking something bitter then? Is it a lot of Amaro?
Typically, yes. Both of these Amaros don't tend to lean on, when you think of Amaro, everybody seems to think really bitter. These are kind of less of that. Yeah.
Okay, what is this? High West?
Now the good stuff.
And now we're using High West Double Rye. So a little bit of rye whiskey. Bitter cubes, Jamaican #1 bitters.
Bitter cube. Is that the Ira from Milwaukee?
It sure is.
Oh, I remember he used to be at Violet Hour back in the
Yeah,
day.
absolutely. Ira's very good to us. So flavor profile is black pepper, ginger, and allspice.
Okay, so what kind of ice was went in the shaker?
We're just using Hoshizaki to stir the cocktail.
And you poured it back into a glass, like a pint glass.
Yeah, and so we're just going to use it and stir it in a mixing glass to help dilution on this.
Are you of the school that if it's dark spirits like this, you're going to stir it? If it is citrus based, you're going to shake it most of the time?
Yeah, sure. All rules are made to be broken, right? But typically, yes. I mean, when we're talking about a cocktail that's all spirit, yes, it's going to be stirred and with citrus or sugar in it.
Now, we should tell people you're stirring with the bar spoon and then you're tasting with a straw. And what are you looking for, the dilution here or chill or what?
I'm looking for both. I'm looking for perfect dilution. I'm looking for temperature. I want all those flavors to meld together.
Hang on a second. So you want to get a separate glass. You put your 2x2x2 cube in that rocks glass, and then you strained into that glass. So even though you used the Hoshizakis in the glass you were stirring the cocktail in to dilute it slightly, you poured it into this other glass with the very slow dilution ice cube.
Correct. And that'll be what's presented and what's served. This way it'll keep the cocktail nice and cold.
Now what are you doing here?
We're just going to do a little bit of an orange spritz on the top.
It's a podcast, so they can't see what you're doing. So you explain what you did. You had a peeler.
Use a Y vegetable peeler just to peel off some of the orange zest, and then skin side facing down of your peel. Do a slight squeeze, release some of the orange oils over the top of the cocktail, and then insert the orange peel on the side of the cocktail.
So this will now stay cool for quite some time, and it will not dilute that much at all, right? Because the big ice cube's in there.
Nice and slow dilution for sure.
And it sure looks pretty too, doesn't it?
It does. It's a simple, classic garnish on it.
And then you're going to sort of do the same thing. You put the straw in and sort of stop it with your finger. Just take a little taste like the bartenders do.
Ah, that's good. I'm a huge Manhattan fan, so
Great.
I like pretty much every variation on a Manhattan.
Yeah.
I love the booziness when it's diluted this much so that it doesn't taste hot in your mouth. This is beautifully balanced. And all of the bitter components that you put in there are perfectly matched to the sweet things. Of course, the creme de cacao, but also that double rye. It's a spicy. I just recently tasted it by itself. I found it quite spicy, but it's got a gorgeous sweetness to it as well. Absolutely. So I think that worked.
So I noticed you tasted it twice as you were stirring. That's important because obviously the first time was not diluted enough. Correct. You needed to get that balance.
Absolutely. Always looking for the balance. I mean, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, whatever it might take as far as tasting it. I don't want to send anything out without it being done correctly. Second drink, we're going to do Le Chapeau. It was currently on the menu as far as for one of our large format cocktails.
I didn't take French in school. That's the hat, right?
The hat. Correct. A little bit of pineapple juice. A little bit of lemon juice.
And these are, again, mixing into a jigger, measuring into a jigger, and then pouring into a cocktail shaker.
Plum syrup.
What's the plum part
It's
of
a
it?
plum simple syrup. So we just do equal parts water and sugar and sliced plums. Let it sit for 24 hours, strain it off, and you have plum syrup. And so now we're using a local brandy, Rheinhall plum brandy.
What is this? I'm sorry.
Amaro Montenegro. Beautiful sort of nutty Italian liqueur, another Amaro.
Likes the Amaro.
Amaro and pineapple, just sort of a beautiful marriage.
I would agree with that.
Okay, well, this is a nice bottle. What is this one?
And then this is Magnus, one of Highland Park's newest releases. Then we're going to use some tiki bitters.
Wait, tell me what tiki bitters are.
Mostly cinnamon, a lot of cinnamon, a little bit of floral to it.
And now this is the Hoshizaki again?
Shake it on Hoshizaki. Because we're going to serve this on crushed ice, it certainly doesn't need to be shaken a whole lot.
Now, for crushed ice, I've got a Lewis bag at home, which is kind of a tough canvas bag. You put ice into it and you just whack it with a hammer, right?
Absolutely. Mallet, if you're lucky enough, you got a really strong muddler. We can use it with the muddler as well. We're actually lucky enough because we do high volume. We have an ice crusher. So we just throw our Hoshizaki into the machine, flip the switch, crushes the ice for us.
Okay.
Before we had that, we did it the old school way, and we hand crushed ice.
That's a good workout.
Yes.
Okay, so now the crushed ice is going to go. You got a very beautiful, dramatic serving piece here.
Yeah, it looks like it's about a quart capacity, maybe, something like that.
We'll have a picture, by the way, on our website, thefeedpodcast.com, as well as our Facebook page. Okay, so you're pouring now through a strainer over into the crushed ice.
Correct. Then we're going to use our swizzle stick just to get a little bit of air in there.
And where do you get a swizzle stick? Like at Michael's?
I don't know. I've never seen it at Michael's. We typically order from Cocktail Kingdom.
All of our listeners should know about Cocktail Kingdom. It is, it's where professional bartenders buy a lot of their stuff, but they got gorgeous, gorgeous products.
Wait, well, Mike, can you just back up for a second? The swizzle stick, it's a stick, and at the end it looks like little chicken feet, kind of, and you put that part down into the drink in the bottom?
Correct. And then you want to just, I guess what they call swizzle. So if you put this long part of the handle in between your two palms and just sort of swish your palms back and forth.
And what is that doing? Agitating and mixing underneath?
Agitating the ice a little bit, so it's going to start the dilution, but it's also putting some air into that cocktail to help lift it and brighten that.
Thing. Oh wait, no, he's got the last thing that he's opening some Prosecco.
So, bottle of Prosecco, and then we'll just plunge that right into the cocktail, if you will.
Nose down into the cocktail.
There's Le Chapeau.
All right, we're going to take a taste here. Rick's getting his camera ready. I got to get my camera too. We'll get a taste here. 1 second. Again, I'm just amazed with the balance because you'd think, pouring all of the booze in here with the Amaro and the Magnus, and it might be too much for me. Again, you have so much dilution going on with all this crushed ice right now. It's diluting at a pretty rapid rate right now. So within 3 or 4 minutes, it's going to taste different than it does right now, yeah?
It probably will, yes. And again, the idea behind it is we're making it for 2, for 4, for 6, or 8, but we're going to share it, and we're going to do it pretty quickly.
Right.
So.
Now, when you're doing it for 8, is it sort of a bathtub-sized vessel that you bring to the table? Because you said this was for 2, and I'm looking at it thinking, wow.
It obviously gets much bigger, yes.
Yeah, I guess so.
This is more than 2. All right, well, when you come to Chicago, come over to Sable and say hello to Mike Jones behind the bar. He's the guy behind the stick. He will definitely show you the ice cubes, take you around, give you a little tour here. This has been really educational, and thanks for your time today and just hanging out with us and pouring us some booze.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks.
Great having you.
All right, coming up next week, a challenge involving one of the most readily available items in the produce aisle, but we're not talking about coleslaw.
The great thing about this kind of recipe is that you could add anything. You could add some carrots for sweetness. You could add some raisins, some currants, any kind of sweet element to it. And it goes with almost anything. Any protein would fare well because of how resilient cabbage is.
The chef of Kimsky stops by to accept our cabbage challenge. That's next week on our show. You can always contact us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter @The Feed Podcast. You You can also check out our ingredient challenges, get recipes and other information about previous shows by simply visiting our website, thefeedpodcast.com. And don't forget to subscribe and rate our show on iTunes. Be sure to follow me at Rick_Bayless.
And I'm at Steve Dolinsky. I think Rick has had a few more sips than I have. More information about Just Ice and Sable on our website as well. Linnea Dominic's our intern. Max Dolinsky supervised today's music. Bureaucratic wrote and performed our theme song. And the Feed podcast is edited by Matt Cunningham at Truthful Enthusiasm. Whether you're an individual or institution, get your story online with truthfulenthusiasm.com. Thanks for listening, everybody, and cheers.
Frigid water experts. That will definitely go down in the archives of the feed.
Yes.
These frigid water experts. Oh, my God.